Victory Works is one of many third-party developers for TS Classic. They've been around for a fairly long time, and have stuck out in my memory for at least 12 years at this point, initially because of their Great Western Railway locomotive packs, like the Small Prairies for instance. But in more recent times, they've branched out to modelling locomotives from various other companies, and even breaking from tradition at one point with the GT3 gas turbine locomotive, released in July 2015. Today, we'll be looking at one of the more recent VW products, namely the War Department Austerity 210, otherwise known as the WD or Woofer Dunk. This video is not sponsored, and I paid for the DLC in question with my own money. But first, a brief history of the WD 210. This was a class of 150 locomotives designed by Robert Riddles, and built by the North British Locomotive Company of Glasgow, Scotland between 1943 and 1945. The design was derived from Riddles's previous WD 280, with the main alteration being a fifth driving axle to allow for a lighter axle loading. So, despite having the same wheel arrangement as the later BR Standard 9F, also designed by Mr. Riddles, the WD 210s were not as powerful as the 9F. Indeed, they only got a power rating of 8F. The WD's design was based on Stanya's 8F class from the LMS, albeit with several modifications to make the engines quicker and cheaper to build. In other words, Riddles was prioritising low cost over design life because, at the time of the locomotive's construction, World War II was still raging, and the War Department needed them to be in service as quickly as possible to help out with the war effort. All 150 examples of the 210 variant survived the war, after which 27 stayed in the UK, while the rest of the class went to work in other countries. 103 ran in the Netherlands as the Nederlandse Spoorwegen 5000 class, while 4 ran in Syria as the CFS Class 150/6, and 16 ran in Greece as the Hellenic State Railways LB class. As for the engines that stayed in the UK, 25 of them were later sold to British Railways, who numbered them from 90750 to 90774, and the remaining 2 went to the Longmoor Military Railway, who numbered them as 600 Gordon and 601 Kitchener. Fortunately, 8 of the WD 210s are still with us, with 1 in the Netherlands, 4 in Greece, and 3 in England. Those in Greece are apparently in very poor condition, with 2 of them not having run since the early 2000s. As for the Dutch engine, numbered as WD 73755 Longmoor, she is on static display in the Railway Museum in Utrecht. Meanwhile, one of the WD 210s preserved in England is in operational condition at the North Norfolk Railway. This locomotive is painted in BR black with the number 90775, despite the fact that she never actually worked for British Railways. Instead, this was one of the locomotives that went to Greece after the war, and was repatriated in 1984. That rhyming was unintentional. She has been working at the North Norfolk Railway for over 20 years now, but is unable to run on the main line because of the flangeless wheels on her third driving axle. Incidentally, the sole surviving Austerity 280 is in a similar situation, in the sense that she is also restored in BR black, with the number 90733, despite the fact that she never worked for British Railways in her service life. This locomotive was originally War Department number 79257, and after the war, she worked in the Netherlands and Sweden before being repatriated in 1973. She is now preserved at the Keighley and Worth Valley Railway. Another famous WD in preservation is number 600, Gordon, originally WD 73651. After the war, He worked on the Longmoor Military Railway in Hampshire, where he stayed until the LMR's closure in 1969. By this point, Gordon had become a celebrity engine, in a sense, and was saved for preservation by the Severn Valley Railway. Unfortunately, he has been out of action since 1999, and as of April 2025, is now on display in the engine house at Highley. And no, this is not the basis for the North Western Railway's number 4. The WD Austerity 210Os were released for Train Simulator in July 2022. 4 years later, the pack is still available to buy on Steam Sounds Supreme's website for £14.50, or around 31 New Zealand dollars, at full price. Prior to releasing the 210Os, Victory Works also modelled and released the WD 280. This means that the two variants are sold separately, but they're not like the Crosty Boiler 9F situation, in the sense that the WD 210 is not just an add-on for the 280 pack. In other words, you do not need to already own the WD 280 for her 210 counterpart to function. Incidentally, the WDs are not the only World War II era locomotives that Victory Works have modelled for TS. The others are the Southern Railway Q1 Class 060 and United States Army Transportation Corps S160 Class 280, although the Q1 model is getting a bit long in the tooth now, for it was released in July 2014. And yes, this is Neville. Just under 2 years later, in June 2016, we got the S160, and this thing is aged better than the Q1 if you ask me. As for what you get in the WD 210 pack, we'll start off with the liveries and variants. For reasons of which I am not aware, the Greek and Syrian variants are not included, but as for the variants that you do get, they are as follows. War Department Green, WD Black, Longmoor Military Railway Blue, as either 600 or 601, British Railways Black, 1948 to 1950, BR Black, 1950 to 1956, BR Black, 1956 to 1967, Nederlandse Spoorwegen 5000 class, although I keep wanting to say 1500 class despite these not being ex-Woodhead electrics, and Preservation Era BR Black, as 90775 the Royal Norfolk Regiment. I have no idea what chorus number 7 is doing here. All three of the Working Days BR Black variants come with both clean and weathered conditions, labelled with the suffix worn in the scenario editor. Some rolling stock is included with the WD 210, although one of the included items is the Kuju era LMS 20-ton brake van, a model that VW have reused numerous times throughout their add-ons. As for the other stock, these are a War Department ramp wagon, war flat, and 10-ton van. The ramp wagon and war flats are quite unusual because of their tank loading feature, but before you try the tank loading, you need to make sure that the ramp wagon is the last in the consist, and that the back of the train is parked at least 15 metres ahead of any other rolling stock. The tank loading didn't work in either of my attempts at Shepton Mallet and Evercreech Junction, so I tried somewhere else on a different route. This feature is activated with Control X, and once the ramp wagon has disassembled itself, the tanks will drive up the ramp and onto the wagons. This process will repeat itself until all the flatbeds are loaded, and as far as I know, you can have as many flatbeds in the consist as you like. One aspect of Victory Works locomotives that sticks out in my memory is their compatibility with both standard and advanced driving modes. They start in standard mode when you load into a scenario, but advanced mode can be toggled on or off by pressing Ctrl A, so it's a different setup from the older Mesh Tools locomotives, like the Ginty and J50, that had separate standard and advanced variants. I strongly advise reading the manual for the WD 210, since it goes into a lot of detail about how to drive this locomotive, especially in advanced mode. The 210's texturing is an improvement over the somewhat glossy textures that I remember seeing on older VW products, such as the previously mentioned GWR Small Prairies. However, depending on the light levels and which side of the locomotive is in shadow, it can be difficult to see the finer details on the smoke box. That's one of the few things I dislike about the WD 210's. The WDs also have numerous customization options, which you can change via the locomotive's number string in the scenario editor. See the manual for a link to the random number generator thingy that VW created. It allows you to set up a locomotive number string from a series of drop-down menus, and works for what appears to be the entire Victory Works catalogue, not just the WD 210. One downside to the WD, and other VW products with customization options, is that any changes you make will not show up in the scenario editor. You'll have to load into driver mode for the changes to appear. For the longest time, one thing I didn't like about Victory Works locomotives, such as the pannier tanks, was their lack of any kind of performance mode. As a result, and depending on your computer specifications, the frame rates could take a noticeable dive whenever you had the firebox door open. Fortunately, the WD 210 has a feature where you can turn off the shadow casting lights by pressing Ctrl L. Ideally, I'd like to see this feature retrofitted to the other older Victory Works packs, such as the LMR K1 Class 260 and GWR County Class 460, for two random examples. I couldn't find any mention of an ideal fire mass in the manual, but I tried running the WD, more specifically number 600, Gordon, with his fire mass at around 69 to 72% as marked on the F4 heads-up display, and that seemed to do the trick. Not just for Gordon, but other WD 210's in general when I tried driving them. Annoyingly, the firing stops whenever you turn off the HUD and bring it back. I don't recall seeing this issue with firing and the HUD happening on locomotives from other developers, only the WD 210 so far. In any case, Gordon steamed adequately on this test run up the Coniston Branch, to the point where his safety valves were blowing off on a frequent basis. As for audio on the WD 210, this is generally solid, especially where the chuff sounds are concerned. Although, to be honest, I'm not really a fan of the hooter whistle, but it is at least realistic for the woofer dunks. One issue I have with the 210's audio is a glitch where the chuffing sounds occasionally cut out while you're driving along with the regulator open. This happened to me when I was driving from Stranraer town to Kirkhowen. Incidentally, it's worth mentioning the fact that this locomotive's valve gear and reverser rod move when you adjust the cutoff. That's been a feature on VW products as far back as the GWR steam rail motor, which was released in February 2014. When you're driving the WD 210, and once you've got the locomotive up to speed, I would recommend winding the reverser back from around full forward gear or 50% cutoff to somewhere between 30% and 20% in order to maintain speed and a decent rate of acceleration without losing too much steam. In saying that, it can be difficult to raise steam depending on the train's weight and the severity of a given route gradient, and it doesn't help that the fire mass is slow to build up when the engine's working hard. During a test run with number 600 Gordon on Marsdenshire, I couldn't get him to any speed higher than 50.6 miles per hour on level track, so I would say that this locomotive is not ideal for sustained high-speed running. The WDs are better suited to cruising along with a freight train at around 38 to 45 miles per hour, or slogging over steeply graded routes like the Somerset and Dorset Railway. On the whole, I have found it interesting to revisit the War Department Austerity 210 from Victory Works, and I would recommend this pack to TS Classic players if they like military-related locomotives, or just like to run a heavy freight train in general. On the one hand, I'm of the opinion that the WD Austerity tender engines should have been grouped together in one big pack instead of being sold separately, and I also think that the 280 pack has a better rolling stock selection overall. But on the other hand, I realise that having the 280 and 210 sold separately means that you don't have to buy both locomotive designs if you only want one of them. And to be fair to the 210 pack, there is still that highlight in the form of the unusual tank loading feature, provided that you can set it up correctly. Personally, my favourite aspect of this pack, aside from the tank loading, is the inclusion of LMR No. 600 Gordon. And all things considered, I am of the opinion that the WD 210 is still up to the usual high standard of quality that I would expect from Victory Works, and I'll settle for giving this thing 7.5 out of 10. Anyone else who owns this add-on, or has seen a WD 210 running in real life, is welcome to share their thoughts on these locomotives in the comments.